Is there any apologies?
We've got apologies from Councillor M. Coyle, apologies from Councillor McVeigh, Stokes and Watson.
Okay. Is there any declarations of interest? No. Thank you very much. We'll just go straight to the applications. And the first application is pages 7012, and it's Mr. Warren Knowles, and it's construction of a building base for mobile tyre service fitters, construction of a cafe with ancillary hot food use, and formation of a car wash, 42 Cumber Road, Steps, Glasgow. The recommendation is grant. Is that agreed? Councillor Goldsides, did you put your hand up there? Oh, no. Oh, Councillor Johnson?
Yes. What are the arrangements to mitigate the noise for the complainants?
Who's going to answer that for Councillor Johnson? It's a bit of an echo there, Tom, but I think we've got the gist of your question.
I think, Convener, yeah, I think I caught the gist of it was to do with noise, and there's sort of surrounding residents reasonably close. As part of the application process, what we did was we consulted our environmental health colleagues, and there was also a noise impact assessment submitted by the applicants, which looked at the likely noise implications of the development. The one concern was related to the kind of car wash, and in terms of the noise impact assessment results, environmental health colleagues concluded that with the background traffic noise, you wouldn't really notice it above that. So there was no requirement for any noise mitigation measures to be undertaken on site, but it was something that was looked at very closely during the application process.
But there is a it does say there's a condition limiting noise levels is proposed. That's at 8.3.
So there was one, we have put a condition on towards the end of, I think of the condition 10 or 11, that limits the noise impact from kind of plant and equipment that might have, so the likes of extraction equipment that might be on the cafe, and you know, any other kind of plant and equipment that might be on any of the other buildings. So just to limit that within recognised noise limits.
Okay.
You happy that way, Tom? You agree you can? Thank you.
Convener, I think Councillor Anderson had put into the chat bar. I don't know if it was she wanted to come in on the application or not.
Lynn?
Yes, I did. Thank you. I've got several concerns. I know we've talked about the noise impact assessment already, but that's going to be based on theory, what actually it will be built. The houses in Pear Tree Drive, these were all built in the last few years, and they were built right up to the boundary of this. We know there's going to be noise, so how is it good placemaking to put something like that right next to houses? On page 8, there's a map showing it now. It's right across from the co-op, which is number 63 in Cumber Road, so that there is often quite a jam of traffic on that main road there. And it's only a couple of hundred feet up the road from the entrance to this. I'm concerned about traffic backing up to the lights at Cumbernauld Road and Loch Road. Page 11 of the report says that the unauthorised use ceased. That's categorically not true. This car wash has not ceased working at all. It's worked all the way through since it was first notified that they needed planning. In Cumbernauld Road, you can see there's a really wide pavement there, and that is where JB Tyre Services, who are based in Laundry Lane, they park vans on that all the time. So if this is granted, what happens? Do they keep parking there and block the view for entrance, block it for pedestrians, parents with prams? Or do we start having people who are using the proposed cafe? Do they start parking there? I would like that addressed as well. Bear with me. That's it. That's all my points. I'm not convinced that it actually complies with policy. Thank you.
Graham, could you answer the questions?
So as you know, we've discussed the noise impact assessment, and you know that was required because of the change in circumstances in terms of there being residential properties immediately to the south of the site. This site, I mean, over the years, has had a whole range of different uses on it. It's an established kind of commercial site in a largely residential area, albeit the co-op being located opposite. It's something, so there's been car-related businesses, car washes, all that kind of thing operating at this site for a good number of years. As I say, in terms of the noise impact assessment, it was found that the proposed uses were acceptable. After, if this is developed and there's noise issues arising, then environmental health obviously have a role to play, and they can come in and carry out, sort of assessments and try and establish if there's a noise nuisance occurring. But with the combination of the assessment that was undertaken and the condition that's been imposed, it was considered to be acceptable from a noise point of view. With regards to traffic and transportation matters, our colleagues in roads looked at it, and subject to conditions, they were satisfied that it was an acceptable development. So there's conditions been put on about the visibility, in terms of the site access, and this ensuring that the visibility display is maintained at all times. So they were satisfied that it was an acceptable development. You raised concerns about parking on, and you're right, it is quite a wide pavement area there. You raised concerns about parking on the pavement. That's really beyond our control. It would be more a matter for the police to investigate if you've got unauthorised or parking, inconsiderate parking. The development itself should have enough parking within it to serve the various different uses, so it shouldn't lead to parking on the actual street. I think there is one more point about maybe the car wash carrying on. Our understanding was that it ceased, but if that's not the case, we accept what you say.
Lynn, are you happy with the replies, or you've got an alternative motion or whatever?
Yeah, I'd like to propose to refuse it.
Recommending that before you go to the vote.
Oh, right.
That the group that are walking the car wash put bollards on the outside of the pavement there to stop parking. Would that be?
Graham?
That would be something our roads colleagues would consider. They tend to, if there's a consistent parking issue where people bump up on pavements, that kind of thing, they would tend to put kind of railings up. So it's something that they could do. They haven't suggested it in connection with this planning applications. I guess if it proved to be an issue, it's something that they could consider in time.
I think Alan Stubbs was on, was he? Did I see his name come up?
Aye, Harry, I was just going to move the recommendation in the report, Grant.
Okay, right, I've got to move the recommendation, Grant. We'll get a seconder for that.
I'll second that.
Councillor Logie. Anyone otherwise minded? Councillor Anderson?
Okay, I'll second Councillor Anderson.
Oh, no, she's not said anything yet.
I did. I had already moved it, Harry.
All right, sorry. No, I waited. There were other people wanting in, so that's why I waited to take the motion. So your amendment is, Councillor Anderson?
To refuse.
On the grounds of?
I don't agree it complies with policy, and I don't agree that the information in the report is accurate.
Okay, that's It's against policy. That's what you're saying. That's your reason for it. Give it a second for Councillor Anderson.
I'll second it.
Councillor Goldsacks. Okay, we'll take the amendment first, if that's okay, from Councillor Anderson. You want to do the roll call vote? Hey, Mark, please.
Yeah, convener. So just to clarify, Councillor Anderson, second by Councillor Goldsack, has moved that the application is refused, and that will be an amendment. The motion from Councillor Stubbs, second by Councillor Loke, to grant will be the motion. So we'll go through the amendment or we'll go through each elected member, and they can let me know whether motion, amendment, or abstain. So we'll go through in alphabetical order. So Councillor Anderson.
Amendment.
Councillor Beveridge. Councillor Beveridge, he was on the call earlier.
Yeah, he's still is in, but I don't see his face.
Okay, we'll move on.
Yeah.
Councillor Burgess. Councillor Burgess, Councillor Burgess, don't touch anything. I'll unmute you. But I'm trying to unmute you, Councillor Burgess. Maybe sit back. Don't lean on your. No. Right, Convener, we'll come back to Councillor Burgess if that's okay.
That's fine.
Councillor Coyle is not in the meeting. Councillor Sophia Coyle.
Motion.
Councillor Curran.
Motion.
Councillor Douglas.
Amendment.
Councillor Farouk, I don't think is on the meeting.
Yes, he's on.
Councillor Farouk on.
Yep.
Councillor Farouk.
Yes.
Is that motion or amendment?
Councillor Farouk, is it motion or amendment?
Motion.
Motion. Councillor Fotheringham.
Amendment.
Councillor Goldsack.
Amendment.
Councillor Graham.
Motion.
Councillor T. Johnston.
Have to abstain. I can't hear anything. All I'm getting is echoes.
Thank you, Councillor Johnston. Councillor Kelly.
Motion.
Councillor Lennon. I don't think Councillor Lennon's on the meeting.
No.
Councillor Logue.
Motion.
Councillor McGregor.
Motion.
Councillor McLaren.
Motion.
Councillor McPake.
Motion.
Councillor McVeigh is an apology. Councillor Quigley.
Motion.
Councillor Redding.
Motion.
Councillor Shields.
Motion.
Councillor Stokes is an apology. Councillor Stubbs.
Motion.
Councillor Watson is an apology, and we'll go back to Councillor Burgess. I think he's unmuted.
Amendment. Thank you.
Amendment. Chair, that's the voting completed. We have 13 for the motion, 5 for the amendment, and 1 abstention, so the application is granted.
Thank you very much.
Mark, if you don't mind, I think Tom's got on twice. That's why he's getting a lot of feedback and echo. So is there any way you can maybe cancel one of them and then it'll maybe help Tom Johnston?
I'll do so, Councillor Coyle. I'll remove him from one of the connections.
Give me a shout when you've done that and I can get on to the next application, Mark.
Hello?
Is that you now, Tom?
Hello?
That's fine. Yeah, shoot.
Right. Thanks.
Okay. Next applications, pages 13 to 27, Mr. W. D. and R.T. Hill. It's a Section 42 application. It's a variation of Condition 1 of planning permission 15/1634/PPP, residential development and associated uses, including community uses and retail in principle. It's to amend statutory timescales covering the submission of the additional reserved matters information and the start of the development at Weems Hill Farm, Castle Hill Road, Overton. And the recommendation is grant.
Agreed.
Convener,
Councillor
Councillor
Fotheringham, see
Fotheringham
you
wants to comment.
sign. Councillor Fotheringham.
Yeah, sorry, I wasn't unmuting there. I'm all for house building, but this development has never been the norm in Ward 21. It's contrary to the development plan, and it's been built on greenbelt land, and that greenbelt land is overlooking the Clyde Valley, which is a heritage of that area. The development was and still is unwanted by North Lanarkshire Council and the local community. And on page 23, it refers to continued supply of housing. It's not a development of affordable homes or for social rent. It's going to be a development of Millionaires Row with breathtaking views of the valley, and which is the green belt that it's contrary to. I understand that permission has been granted, and it's been a long process of, getting that permission. However, does that mean that we then have to accept an extension? It doesn't tell us how long that extension's for. Is it indefinite? So that's questions that I can't find those answers. On page 22, 5.1, it raises the issues of it's stating that it raises issues of a strategic and local nature. It doesn't go into the kind of detail of that. The local community have been very vocal, again on page 22. They have been very clear of their feelings of the local community. I do agree with all their comments, the traffic, the noise, the environmental aspects. And I reiterate again, this isn't an affordable housing development. And I do not believe that, COVID should be a mitigating factor for putting this development back or giving them that extension. And on that basis, then I would move to refuse the application for the extension.
Well, can you wait till
Yep.
we'll have a wee discussion, then you can move?
Don't worry.
But, just to remind the colleagues that are just maybe on the council, this was an application that came up in front of the council, and we refused it, and it went to the Scottish ministers, and the Scottish ministers granted it. So once they've granted it, that means that it then comes in, the local development plans that come in. It moves from Greenbelt to housing development, but that's just a wee bit of history. I'm sure that who's the planning officer's got to answer some of the points that Councillor Fotheringham made.
That's myself, convener.
All right.
Do you want me to go through some of the points that Councillor Fotheringham?
Could you reply to Councillor Fotheringham? Yeah.
Sure, no trouble. Yes, the council officers spent a lot of time and money trying to resist this application when it first came in a few years ago, and myself and others spent many days in Kirkchrapple putting the case against the proposal. Now the conclusion was that the Scottish Minister's reporter and the Scottish Ministers themselves decided that planning permission should be granted, primarily because of the need for housing in the council area. So what's happened since then is that it's now part of the proposed local development plan. Now it hasn't caught up yet, so the development plan hasn't caught up with this decision. So it still is contrary to the development plan. You mentioned it raised issues of strategic and local nature, and those are addressed in the planning assessment in paragraph 8 in quite detail. But basically, it still is a departure from the development plan, but because of other material considerations, primarily the fact that it already has planning permission, the fact that it's now part of our proposed local development plan, and the fact that we're now counting upon it to form part of our housing land requirements. For those reasons, that's why we're recommending approval for this proposal. So I fully accept that, in terms of objections, back in the day when the application first came in, and indeed now, it's been the basis of objections from local people. But in terms of the factors I've just mentioned there, we feel the need to recommend approval. You mentioned the houses might not be affordable. There's no requirement for affordable housing in the current or proposed local development plan for that area. How long would it be for? It would be for another 3 years. They've asked for permission, and if they were able to submit detailed schemes in that 3 years period, then they wouldn't have to apply again. But in the meantime, they've obviously felt the need to apply for three more years permission. In terms of the local impacts that you mentioned and the locals have mentioned in their objections, those were all addressed at the 5-day hearing and the appeal, and the council had concerns on several fronts. All those concerns were addressed at the appeal hearing, and as I said before, the need for housing and planning conditions were, in the view of the Scottish ministers, sufficient to mitigate those concerns.
Thanks, Lindsay. Anyone else with any points, any questions?
Convener, Councillor Burgess wishes to come in.
Bob?
Thank you, Convener. I'm not sure if you can see, but I've got my name up. But anyway, I'm in, which is the main thing. I agree totally with Councillor Fotheringham. I think we've got a situation where we've been, obviously this has been pushed through by the Parliament. But at the end of the day, we've got a situation where we can't even do the Horsley Bray, which is a chicane they're putting in. We can't even do that. And now we're going to have to look at the amount of cars that's going to be coming into the area. We've got 4 major house building projects coming off in the Overton area. That's going to be massive. It's not just this one. There's going to be a whole load of other things coming in on top of that. And I agree with Councillor Fotheringham totally. And if she does a motion, I would second that, but that would probably be to no avail. So yeah, I'm pretty upset about the whole thing because the local community don't want it. So I don't know what we can do. Thank you.
Anyone else? Anyone else, Mark?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, John McLaren.
Yeah, I fully understand Councillor Fotheringham taking a decision 3 or 4 years ago with this one, as I recall, and we did refuse this. It then went to appeal, the Scottish ministers, and the report overturned that appeal. Now the extension, we've had the same extension at Moodiesburn twice with the Dempsey development for extensions, and it's been granted. If we had to refuse this today, and it goes back to the Scottish ministers and the reporter, the council could be liable for this bill. We wouldn't need to pay that. We've already refused this, and it's been overturned and granted, and that's the position we're in. Very sorry about that, but that's the position we've got to hold.
Anyone else want in?
Chair, Councillor Logue wishes to come in.
Councillor Logue.
Yeah, I mean, just to re-emphasise what John McLaren has just said, I mean, I think the planning officer is absolutely right when he contextualises the history of this site. And as a council, we did refuse it. It went to the Scottish ministers. They overturned the decision of the council. If we do not agree to the recommendation today and we move for the amendment which has been postulated, then it is back to the Scottish ministers. The Scottish ministers will uphold the appeal, and we will be left with an extortionate legal bill, as has happened on a number of occasions. I can understand the frustrations of the local elected members, but unfortunately the planning reality is that there are no sustainable grounds for refusing this application. I would, if John is prepared to move it, I'll certainly second the recommendation.
You moving the recommendation, John?
Yes, I move Grant.
Seconded by Councillor Logue. I believe Councillor Johnson wanted in, did you, Tom? No. Okay, Councillor Fotheringham. I'll take your amendment now.
Yeah, I would move to refuse
Okay.
the extension.
And seconded by Councillor Burgess. Is that agreed? Yep. Struggle with. Okay, Mark, got the motion, the amendment. We'll take the amendment first.
Well, we'll go through chair alphabetically. So the motion is to grant, the amendment is to refuse, and I'll go through alphabetically the elected member. So we'll start off with Councillor Anderson.
Amendment.
Councillor Beveridge. I think Councillor Beveridge maybe not on the call now. Councillor Burgess.
Amendment.
Councillor S. Coyle. Councillor Coyle.
Amendment.
Councillor Curran.
Motion.
Councillor Douglas.
Amendment.
Councillor Farouk.
Amendment.
Councillor Fotheringham.
Amendment.
Councillor Goldsack.
Amendment.
Councillor Graham.
Motion.
Councillor Johnston.
Amendment.
Councillor Kelly.
Motion.
Councillor Lennon, I don't think is on the call. Councillor Logue.
Sorry, motion.
Councillor McGregor.
Amendment.
Councillor McLaren.
Motion.
Councillor McPake.
Motion.
Councillor McVeigh's an apology. Councillor Quigley.
Motion.
Councillor Redding.
Motion.
Councillor Shields.
Motion.
And finally, Councillor Stubbs.
Amendment.
Amendment. Convener, following the vote, the amendment has attracted 10 votes and the motion has attracted 9 votes. Therefore, the application is refused.
Thank you very much. Next item 3 is the planning enforcement notice appeals lodged pages 29 to 30. That's for noting. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Agenda item 4 is an update on planning consultations from a presentation for Lorna Bowden. Lorna, are you there?
Yeah, sorry. I apologise in advance if I can't get the technology to work, but this is still quite new for me.
And for us all.
Yes. So but it was quite a good chance because the agenda was quite short today. It was quite a good opportunity just to give you a bit of an update and an insight into the work that the planning service is undertaking at the moment. There's a lot going on in the planning world, and for some reason this doesn't seem to be sharing. Oh, here we are. Can people see the presentation now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, right. Yep. So as I say, just to give you an idea of what's coming up, and where we're being consulted by the Scottish Government, it means that there's usually some changes afoot that will follow on from the consultation. So I'm also going to give you just a very brief update on where we are with the North Lanarkshire Local Development Plan. There's one change coming into play related to the new Planning Act. I'll talk about the consultations, and then I was just going to give you a brief overview of the current caseload that the service is dealing with. So the Local Development Plan, as you know, came to committee in February and was approved for submission for examination. That's now happened. We've had 3 reporters appointed to conduct the examination. And one of those reporters does have an environmental background. So at the moment, we're having a few queries from the reporters about the material that they've got in front of them. So the examination is just starting now. We anticipate that the process will take around 6 to 9 months. And if it's like all of the other local development plan examinations that have been undertaken in the last year or so, the focus will be on environmental issues and on housing, very much on housing, and we may even have hearings associated with the housing matters. So it's just I'll just keep updating you as we go along through this process if I get the opportunity. In terms of the Planning Scotland Act 2019 that came into force last July, I gave you an update in August about the changes that had come into force since the Act was put in front of Parliament and was passed. We have we've been notified of one change that's coming into force on the 18th of November, and that relates to changes around Section 75 planning obligations, and it actually will allow us greater flexibility when it comes to negotiating modifications and discharge of these agreements. So in terms of the consultations that are ongoing, I think Gordon Lane might have touched on this briefly back in August. But again, as you all know, housing and housing numbers are a huge issue for all local authorities in Scotland at the moment, and disputes that we're having with house builders about how to calculate the number of houses that we require. And there has been a recent significant Court of Session case which found in favour of the house builders and sort of was contrary to what the Scottish government policy on planning is meant to be, so that the SPP has now been questioned. So the Scottish Chief Planner, has put out a consultation on some amendments that they're proposing to make to the Scottish planning policy on housing, and it's about trying to clarify the situation so that everyone involved in housing development understands how we're going to review proposals for housing in terms of our local development plans, and how we calculate the requirements in terms of housing land supply against housing completions. So that consultation was only submitted last week, so we expect there'll be some guidance coming out quite soon. From a personal point of view, there are obviously different approaches being promoted by different authorities, different approaches being promoted by different planning agents and different house builders. All we really need here is some sort of certainty. We might not like what how the Scottish Government want us to carry out these audits and how we count houses and completions and how we measure land supply, but we just need a level playing field where everyone understands which rules we're playing by. So hopefully we'll get some clarity around that whole process soon. The other consultation, which I think ends next week, is on short-term lets. There's a lot of problems across Scotland, mainly around the cities and tourism hotspots, around the Airbnb premises and the problems that they're causing for residents in areas that are popular for Airbnb properties. The system that the government is proposing to introduce is around creating areas where there's a sort of prevalence of these types of properties, and designating control areas where people wanting to rent out properties for short-term lets would have to get a licence. Now, in North Lanarkshire, we do have a number of properties that are advertised through Airbnb. I've put two examples up on the screen for you. Now, the proposals that the government have for controlling this aren't really of help to us, because we don't have concentrated areas where you get a lot of these properties together. They tend to be a bit more dispersed. It's isolated cases where we have incidents of antisocial behaviour taking place, so we're not entirely sure that what's being proposed would actually help solve the problems that we have with one or two of these properties, and it is a very limited number for us in North Lanarkshire. But there'll be some comments to the Scottish Government on that. There's also an ongoing consultation at the moment that ends, I think, in about the 19th of November on proposed changes to the pre-application consultation process. I imagine a number of you have been involved in these over the years since they were introduced as a change to the planning system, and they're generally seen as not being particularly satisfactory. I don't think a lot of the time the community don't feel that their views are being taken on board, and some view the process as a bit of a tick box exercise. So the proposal is to change the requirements to have a requirement for the information to be available in both hard copy and electronic versions, so online versions of the information for people to access, as well as hard copies. There's also the proposal to introduce a second public event rather than just one event, which would allow the applicants to demonstrate what the changes they propose to make as a result of their initial consultation, and there'll be more information required in the report that's submitted to the planning service when the application is submitted, and they're also proposing some exemptions for certain types of application. So and the final thing that they're proposing to introduce is a new requirement that the PAC process only lasts for 18 months, and if you haven't made your planning application within that time, then you would have to undertake the PAC process again, which seems quite sensible to me, that it shouldn't just sit there in perpetuity. So we'll be making comments back to the government on that. We also have a change proposed to, this was introduced through the Act, that they were going to review the permitted development rights. And this is going to be a phased approach to reviewing permitted development rights. It's going to happen over 4 phases. And the current consultation is a review of permitted development rights for digital communications infrastructure, agricultural developments, peatland restoration, and development related to active travel. So looking at some of the issues that the government are very keen to promote change in, and whether the permitted development rights need to be amended to facilitate these types of changes taking place. The second phase of the review is going to happen next January, and that will be looking at changes within town centres, so changing what changes you can make within a town centre without requiring planning permission might change, and also looking at infrastructure for electric vehicle charging. And then later in 2021, there'll be two further consultations on district heating systems, allotments, and householder development, permitted development rights. So it is a very comprehensive review of the current system of permitted development rights. This next bit isn't actually a consultation as yet, but the government has sent out a very detailed research paper. They've commissioned the London School of Economics to look at developer contributions and how they are used collectively by authorities in Scotland. And it's a very detailed piece of research. There are 73 questions that we have to answer, and it's about the use of legal agreements, Section 69 agreements, Section 75 agreements, and also Section 48 agreements, which are made under the Road Scotland Act. So all of these agreements where we take contributions either in terms of money, land or buildings in relation to planning applications. So it would seem fairly certain that as a result of this research there'll be proposals to change how that whole process is managed in the future. We also have a consultation on, this is wider than just planning, this one hits across all of the services in the council that undertake capital works. So the Infrastructure Commission is consulting on its draft infrastructure investment plan for Scotland for the years 2021 to 2026. So it sets out the Infrastructure Commission's vision for infrastructure development in Scotland and how it's to support Scotland's resilience, and enable inclusive, net zero and sustainable growth. And that, as I say, it highlights what the government's plans are for delivering infrastructure projects either by itself or through its agencies, and that will have an impact on what most of the council's departments are doing with their infrastructure development in future. So it's quite a wide-ranging consultation. This one's slightly different. This is something I've personally been involved in for the last 2 years. The Scottish Land Commission were tasked by the Scottish Government to coordinate a national vacant and derelict land task force to look at trying to transform the existing approach to bringing vacant and derelict land back into productive use. And that task force has been meeting for the last 2 years. There were a few local authorities on it, but primarily it was Glasgow and ourselves, because we tend to have the largest problem with vacant and derelict land. And the task force has now finished its investigations and has published its final report and its recommendations. So it's just to give a wee bit of background to that. In North Lanarkshire, we have almost 13% of Scotland's vacant and derelict land by area, and almost 15% by the number of sites. And in terms of the Glasgow City region, North Lanarkshire accounts for 41.3% of vacant and derelict land by area. So we have a large legacy of these sites. And the work that's been happening recently has been focusing more on the blight that vacant derelict land actually causes for communities. So it's been identified that it's actually a factor that causes harm to the health and well-being of residents, because it undermines the attractiveness of an area as a place to live and work, and also impact the ability to attract investment, and it puts people off coming to an area as visitors. Life expectancy in Scotland is lower than elsewhere in the UK. I'm sure you're all familiar with that. But around 5,000 more people die in Scotland each year than should be the case. And addressing urban dereliction is seen as a factor that could help to change Scotland's high mortality levels, and it's been adverse physical environment has been identified as a factor in people dying younger. And almost a third of Scotland's population lives within 500 metres of a derelict site. And in deprived communities, that's much higher. In North Lanarkshire, areas that deprived communities have much worse health outcomes, and across Scotland the average is 58%, but in North Lanarkshire 75% of our population lives within 500 metres of a derelict land site. And this figure has actually been increasing annually since 2013. So addressing vacant and derelict land within our communities should have a major role when we're trying to work to reduce health inequalities and improve well-being. And I put this slide up because this is the former Clydesdale, don't know what happened there, went too far. Sorry, the former Clydesdale Steelworks site in New Stevenson, and it was just to show how close this large vacant and derelict site sits. It sits really closely to the residential population. And we do have proposals for development on that site, but there is an existing industrial use on the south side of the site, and because that generates noise, there are implications around having residential development on the site adjacent to it. So it's an ongoing planning issue for us and discussion with the. So as I said, the proximity of vacant derelict land to our deprived communities is a major factor on health and wellbeing. And again, my slide was to show the vacant and derelict sites that are actually in and adjacent to Wishaw Town Centre. So the task force are very keen that we tackle these long-standing derelict sites with a view to looking at how it impacts on people's health. So they've made a series of recommendations. They've recommended is held by local authorities is made much more accessible, so that developers who are looking to access these information on these vacant derelict land sites, and as I say, using the GIS functions that we have, so using map-based databases to assist people to identify these sites when they're looking to develop. They've recommended that there should be a review of land assembly legislation, including introducing compulsory sales orders and having a much stronger focus on what the task force termed stuck sites. So sites that have been a problem for a long time, or have been no development proposals for a long time, blighting communities, and that the government should make funding available for site remediation and infrastructure provision on brownfield sites. There's also proposing that there should be a review of the derelict land fund. Now Scotland, that's only available to certain authorities at the moment, and North Lanarkshire Council benefits from that fund and usually receives about £2 million every year. So we have some concerns about any changes to how that fund is administered, because it might become more widely available. So we've made recommendations around that. And we also want to embed social responsibility as part of the culture of landowners to try and prevent abandoned sites being left. And it's about sites being abandoned and left to sit for a number of years, and they're proposing that the public sector should take a lead in this by ensuring that they have a more proactive estate management policy. So as a council, they're suggesting that we shouldn't be vacating sites or buildings unless we have a proposed use for that site or that building moving forward, so that we don't leave more vacant sites or vacant buildings in our communities. And they are also promoting the establishment of a green infrastructure investment programme aimed at community-led regeneration and promoting the use of these sites, the vacant sites, as so that's the consultations that are ongoing. So there's a lot happening out there at the moment, and it's keeping my team very busy. But over and above that, I thought it might be useful just to run through some of our current significant planning applications that we're dealing with, and just to highlight some that we're expecting to come in the near future before the end of this financial year. So the teams, mainly around Graham and Lindsay's teams, are currently dealing with 3 applications for schools. 2 of those aren't just schools. One's a school and health facility, and another is a school and an early years facility as well. We've got the major programme from the new supply team in terms of our own council house building. We've got multiple developments, and I didn't have time to work out the number of houses that are proposed in current applications by the private sector. We have 2 applications we're currently considering from Lidl for new supermarkets in North Lanarkshire, and we've recently received applications to discharge a number of quite serious and difficult, technically complicated conditions associated with the Moss End rail freight terminal. And we are anticipating applications coming in for a major waste processing plant. That's a council application. There are proposals for employment developments in the Ravenscraig site. We have the Monklands replacement hospital proposal, which at the moment they're looking at 3 sites, but they're anticipating submitting a planning application for a site before the end of this financial year. And we have the applications associated with the City Deal funding that we have, so all the roads applications. So there's a lot happening at the moment in the council area, a lot of investment going on, and the team are working the hardest to deal with those at the moment. And I thought, when I was looking at the slides, one of my staff gave me this, looking at the information for today, gave me this image, and I was quite struck by it, and it was about showing you how planning applications and the development process impacts on communities and individuals. You deal with applications day in, day out, but you don't really think about the impact it's having. And this shows the area between Coatbridge and Airdrie, and these are the applications that we've dealt with over the last 20 years or so. And it was just to give you an image of how widely the planning process impacts upon people. And these can be applications just for pure small householder developments or for major economic drivers. It was just quite a striking image of how widespread planning is felt by the community in North Lanarkshire. So I'm sorry, that was quite a wide-ranging presentation, but I thought it was good just to give you an update on the fact that there's a lot going on in the planning world just now.
Yep. Thanks very much, Lorna. I noticed the New Monklands Hospital, and we get information through the other day. Just to maybe remind all councillors, not just councillors in the planning committee, that possibly could come to the full council as a major development. So if we're putting our tuppence worth in there in any way, just be careful what you say that doesn't debar you from taking part of the meeting whenever it comes in front of the full, if it comes in front of a full council. We'd said that earlier, I think it was last year and maybe the year before, when we had a presentation for the NHS regarding the replacement. So that still applies. I think maybe Mark will send out stuff to the whole council just to remind everybody there. We might all have our private thoughts, but if you start weighing one against the other, then you'll deem yourself as making your mind up before the application. So if we can just keep our thoughts to ourselves on that one. Is there any questions, any points to Lorna on that presentation? It was Councillor Anderson, I see your hand up. So it's school.
Thanks, Lorna. Could Lorna's information be sent by email to us?
Yep.
Thank you.
No problem, I'll circulate that. I'll get Mark to do that.
Any other questions or points?
There's nobody else within the chat bar, convener.
Okay. Right, thanks very much for your attendance. And Pam and Lorna and team, can you hang on? There's a couple of wee things I need to discuss.
Oh, thanks, Chair. Thank you.
Cheers, thanks.
Bye.